Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're dialing in from on this Tuesday, the 28th of January. Thanks for joining me. I am your host, Mike Fiffik, and this is the Legal Lowdown. And this is going to be a new series for 2025. I'm going to do this every month. And this is really intended for small business owners. We're going to talk about things that are related to your business. And I hope that you will find this series helpful for your business. And why don't we go ahead and get started here? Okay, there we go. So little bit about me. I'm a small business owner. I've been practicing law for 32 years. My office is Fiffik Law Group. We are located in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and I have offices in the Pittsburgh market and the suburban Philadelphia market in the lovely town of Radnor on the main line. And we primarily practice in Pennsylvania, but we also do some estate planning work in New Jersey as well. So we're going to talk about legal risk. This is sort of really the beginning, right? The beginning of a lot of different areas of law for small business owners is just understanding legal risk and how to mitigate legal risk, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about what is legal risk and also why, as a small business owner, you should care about what legal risk is as it relates to your business. So let's go in. Legal risk is something that you have to be thinking about because the cost of claims is very expensive for small business owners. $391 billion in 2020 alone. And that is the most recent estimate that we have of the cost to the business community for issues that arise out of legal risk. So that should be a real eye opener for you. And it's increasing year after year. Small businesses, and really what I'm talking about are businesses that have less than $10 million in annual top line revenue every year, shoulder a disproportionate share of these legal costs on an annualized basis. And I have a couple of charts to share with you today. First is this one, and this really tells you the share of total revenue. And you'll see that small businesses are the dark blue, right? They're at the very bottom. So they have about 20% of the share of total revenue that comes into the business world, but their share of the risk is 48%. So they share a huge amount of the cost of legal risk that is out there in the business world. Here is another chart that just shows this to you maybe in a little bit of a different way. And this relates to commercial tort costs. So claims that are very regular types of issues that come into small businesses. And you'll see that the smaller your annual revenue, under 10 million a year, the more disproportionate the costs that are borne by your business. So small businesses have a real big weakness when it comes to legal risk. So it's definitely something that you have to be thinking about, or that you'd be wise to be thinking about as a small business owner. Why are the costs so disproportionate in the way of a burden for small businesses rather than big businesses? Well, number one, I think that small business owners have a tendency to have a reduced understanding of the risks that are out there for their businesses, right? They're oftentimes inexperienced, right? They've only been in business maybe for a few years, or they just don't have enough time to understand all of the risks that are out there because they're too busy building, running, operating, and dealing with things that are happening in their business life. So that's a big reason, right? It's just practical. And then secondly, I think small businesses just make more mistakes. That's all that there is to it. They might be the mistakes of inexperience. They might be the mistakes because they're ill-informed or uninformed about what's going on. But those are the primary reasons I think why small businesses have a disproportionate burden or a disproportionate share of the legal risks and the cost of legal risks that are out there. And this misunderstanding can cost you a ton of money. And I like this health analogy for small businesses, right, as it relates to how they manage risk. You know, if a business owner approached medical issues the way that they approach legal issues for their business, they would avoid regular checkups. They'd get all of their medical information from the internet, like WebMD, right? They would ignore unusual pains and rashes and symptoms. That's what we do, especially us guys. We just want to blow that stuff off because we don't really want to have to deal with it. And they might try to set broken bones or heal their own wounds. That's kind of the health analogy. And that's what small business owners have a tendency to do when it comes to dealing with their risks. Their health care, right, would only occur in the emergency room or the surgeon's table, right? That's the analogy that we have. If a business owner approached medical issues the way that they approach legal issues for business. Waiting until a legal issue turns into a legal problem or a legal dispute is like waiting for a mild medical symptom to turn into something that requires surgery, right? Imagine that insurance doesn't cover the operation and that the doctor won't operate unless you pay a good portion of the bill in advance. This approach is super expensive for your business. It's very disruptive and potentially can kill your business. So that's a bit of the health analogy. And this is how many businesses approach legal issues. They avoid working with an attorney until the need becomes a fight, right? And they don't do any type of proactive planning, proactive analysis. They don't take a proactive approach to the legal risks that their business is facing. And so they have a tendency to solve all of their problems in the operating room, which we know is the most expensive way to solve a medical problem, right? The operating room for your business is the courtroom, right? And believe me, if you're in the courtroom, it's going to be expensive. It's the most expensive way to deal with legal risks facing your business. You don't want to be there if you can possibly avoid it. So here's a little bit of a case study, and I'm going to have these throughout this presentation to try to add a little bit of a flavor to it, right? We've got a business that dealt with a U.S. Department of Labor judgment for over $1.3 million in back wages, right? And this was a restaurant, and they had some bad employment practices, right? And they were requiring servers and bartenders to surrender a percentage of their tips to the restaurant at each additional shift and without having a valid tip pool, right? The employer made all kinds of mistakes. And I guarantee you that these were not evil people, right? These were just business owners trying to run their business, probably trying to make good decisions along the way, but they were just ill-informed about how to do these things in a way that would not be a problem, right? So the employer failed to keep records of how the tips were used, so it was a problem for them for having not a valid tip pool. And the investigators also determined that employers did not pay three of their salaried cooks overtime wages, so they were misclassified. Very common mistakes for a small business owner to make. Not keeping the records that they need, which is the employer's burden to justify the wages that they're paying, and misclassifying their workers and consequently not be either paying them minimum wage or overtime. And so the judgment required the restaurant and its owner, right? Unpaid wage claims are personal liabilities for business owners, potentially, and they had to pay their affected workers over $500,000 in back wages, plus liquidated damages and penalties along the way. This is a mistake that very easily a small business owner could make, not because they're bad people or they're evil or they're trying to get over on their employees, but these are just mistakes because they're ill-informed about the types of how they're supposed to run their payroll and their wages. It's not unusual at all. So let's talk a little bit about the consequences of poor legal risk management. It's going to have increased risk of litigation and regulatory enforcement proceedings like the one that we just looked at from the either U.S. Department of Labor or the PA Department of Labor wage and hour division. Enforcement proceedings are expensive. They're very disruptive. You're going to have an investigator come into your business and review all of your records. You're going to have to make time to find those. And if you can't find them, you're going to be in trouble. And they may want to interview all of your employees as well. That's probably what they'll do. And they're going to do it on short notice. So it's going to be on their time, not on your time. This is just not something that you want to have happen for your business. You're going to, if you're going to spend more time dealing with these problems and less time devoted to building and running your business, and especially if you have a very thin staff, maybe you're a sole practitioner, you're the only person in your business, or maybe you only have a couple of employees and you're trying to cover things along the way. This can really take the time away from revenue generating types of endeavors. You're going to have a greater risk to your own personal assets. There are many business risks that can impair, they can get to your own personal assets. You could be personally liable for some of these business risks, and you're just putting more of your own personal assets on the line. You may have higher insurance costs, more claims is going to equal higher insurance. I think that that's pretty easy to understand. So if you want to keep your insurance costs low, you want to avoid claims, right? And the only way to avoid claims is to be proactive and mitigate your risk, right? You may have internal strife with co-owners in your business or your employees. Probably those wage and hour claims came about because of some bad employee relations or some bad blood with an employee who filed a complaint with the Department of Labor. And then lo and behold, they come in and crack open the can to your entire organization and really make a mess out of things. You may have higher employee turnover, operational instability in your business where things are going sideways because you don't have good operational processes in place. It may also damage public perception and goodwill. It may also damage the perception of your customers as well if you're caught up in some type of a public lawsuit or some type of a dispute that leaks out into the world out there. So these are all reasons why you don't want to have poor risk management. Could lower the value of your business. If you're trying to sell your business and somebody that's looking at your business sees a history of claims against your business, whether it's with the Department of Labor, maybe it's from a customer, maybe it's from a vendor, that you got a long litany of lawsuits filed against your company on the docket, and that's public. Anybody's going to see that. I always do that kind of a check when I am representing somebody who's buying a business. I go check the docket to see what's happening out there. If there are a lot of lawsuits out there, that says something about your business, and it's not complimentary, right? It is not complimentary. So somebody's going to be wondering what other landmines are waiting for me after I sign on the dotted line and pay you the money. What claims are going to come out of the woodwork that I'm going to have to deal with? And you might have failed transactions. A potential sale of your business goes south because you've got all these claims. Maybe you were hoping to borrow money and the lender sees that you've got all these claims out there and they decide to make not to borrow uh, not to lend you money, or you might have stricter credit requirements as well. So, having access to capital is the lifeblood of most small businesses, and bad operations that result in legal risks that come to fruition can impair your ability to borrow along the way. So you can't really afford to be reactive. You have to be proactive, right? That's really the wise business owner does not want to be reactive. They want to try to be proactive. So let's talk a little bit about that. How do we be proactive? We really engage in what I will refer to generally as a legal risk audit. Okay. And a legal risk audit can be as comprehensive or as brief, as required. They're not all the same for every small business owner, but just the general concept of having a legal risk audit is something that you should embrace for your business. It's like a financial or a tax audit, right? Somebody's going to come in, or maybe it's you, take a look at the various processes, focus on the legal risks that are inherent in the various aspects of your business. And the things that are going to be on this checklist are going to be different for every business. Some things will be the same, but some things are going to be different for every business. And really the goal is to manage issues on an ongoing basis. So this isn't like a one-time audit, right? Probably should be doing this annually to take a look at things to see what needs to be shored up, loopholes that need to be closed, weaknesses that need to be patched up, kind of a thing. And it really should be tailored to your particular business. Here are the common sources of legal risks that arise out of your business. First of all, your customers, right? I think we can probably all understand that your customers can be a potential source of business. And those customers can be consumers. If you're in a consumer facing type of a business, maybe you're in a real estate type of a business and they're your tenants. We can have a problem with that. Or maybe you're B2B, right? Your customers are you're more of a B2B type of a business, but risks arise out of all of those relationships that can impact your business. Here's a couple of case studies. If you're a real estate owner and you've got a piece of property, here's a slip and fall accident, right? Pennsylvania woman slipped on a puddle of water in a bathroom caused by a leak, something that was a leak. I doubt that it was something that was sudden, right? It didn't just happen. The leak just started on Monday morning and somebody slipped on Monday afternoon and they were injured. That is less of a risk, believe it or not, than a risk that's been there for a while. You probably knew about it as a business owner. You failed to address it, and then somebody got injured. That's a lack of a process to recognize and address those issues along the way. It's a big claim, right? $350,000 plus somebody got injured and you feel bad about that. Here's another fall accident. A store patron suffered significant injuries when they fell in a store. There could be a variety of things that could cause that. But again, here's another big claim that came to fruition. If you're insured, right, your insurance premiums are definitely going to go up if you just don't lose insurance coverage altogether because of these claims. If you're uninsured for these types of risks, then this is coming out of your pocket. If you even have enough money to pay these claims. So you don't want to have these things to come to pass if you can avoid it. How about B2B vendors, right? So every business has vendors, right? And there are risks that can arise out of these vendor relationships. If you have suppliers, right, or other types of vendors, you're going to be signing some type of a contract with them, most likely. So you could have risks that could arise out of that, especially if you're signing a personal guarantee, and you might have to. If you're buying things on credit to resell or supply your business, you may be required to sign a personal guarantee. And if you don't pay those invoices, you could end up being personally liable for those debts and maybe even get sued personally on those types of claims. Independent contractors that you are working with to do business. Maybe you're a contractor for home improvement or a commercial type of a setting, and you bring other independent contractors in to do some of that work, subs kind of a thing. Their work can, if it's done poorly, can ultimately impact you. If they cause a problem on the job site, right, that's ultimately going to come back to you because the owner has a contract with you. You are going to be responsible for the problems that arise out of whatever the independent contractors are doing for that project. And there are independent contractors of all different kinds. Maybe you've got a transportation business and you've got independent contractor drivers that are out there that cause an accident, miss a delivery, who knows what it is. Those can ultimately come back and bite you in the rear end. If you're a landlord, you're going to have vendors out there, and any other type of a professional type of a setting, you're going to have vendors that can ultimately lead to some kind of risk. Employees, another big source of risk for your business. And please feel free to put questions in the Q&A or the comments, and I'll certainly be going over those in the Q&A session at the end of this session. Be happy to answer those questions for you. But employees can create a lot of risk for you. Maybe they're just doing a terrible job at what they're doing. You really do have to have a quality assurance type of a process in place to make sure that they're getting things done in the right way. my own business, right? If I've got 45 people that work for me, all who are customer facing and doing work for people, and if I'm not checking to make sure that the work that they're doing is quality work, that could result in a missed deadline, a missed filing. Those types of things can really impact the rights and claims of my clients, right? So that same thing will come to pass for your business as well. If somebody that you send out to a job site makes the wrong measurements or writes the wrong things down, and you supply the wrong material or the wrong process and it goes bad, that's ultimately going to impact you. Employees engage in negligence, right? They might be out driving to a job site and cause an accident. That's going to ultimately come back on you. Maybe they are doing something at one of your buildings and mess it up, and a patron gets injured, or a tenant gets injured, or somebody else who's on the property gets injured. That's going to come back on you. You may have claims raised by your employees for discrimination or harassment. Maybe you've discriminated against them. Maybe an employee on your staff has discriminated against them. Maybe somebody that is working for you is harassing your employees. All of those claims could potentially come back to bite you in the rear end. We've already seen from some of the examples that I gave you for that restaurant in Wilkes-Barre, wage and hour claims can be a real problem for small business owners. Business owners can be personally liable for unpaid wages in Pennsylvania. So that's a big thing that you want to make sure that you got shored up so that you don't get caught up in a wage and hour regulatory claim from a Department of Labor, wherever it is that you are, or they don't sue you personally because the employees can do that. They can sue the business and you personally for the unpaid wages, and you could end up not only paying the unpaid wages and statutory penalties, but many wage and hour type statutes in Pennsylvania and in other states entitle the employee to get their attorney's fees paid as well. So that can be a very big endeavor. You could be paying your lawyer to defend the case and your employee's lawyer to pursue the case in order to settle it. It gets really expensive real fast. Your employees are also a source of theft for intellectual property. They might steal your customers. They might steal your data. They might steal your pricing list and go to a competitor or start their own business as well. They can steal your data. These are potential problems for your business as well. So they can be very risky for you. Here's a case study, a $1.5 million age discrimination verdict. An employee was terminated due to their age. Are you involved in every employment decision that's made by your company? Sometimes you are, sometimes you aren't. Maybe you made a decision to let this person go without understanding what the risks were in letting this person go, or you didn't read the tea leaves to realize that this may give rise to an age discrimination claim. Maybe had you followed a certain process or documented the file better, you could have avoided the claim altogether, or you would have had a better defense to it. Sometimes these claims come about and they end up in a judgment because there's not a paper trail or documentation or a process that you could have followed that would have given you a good defense to the case. And you might have had a good defense and avoided the judgment altogether. So that's just a little bit of a lesson, a warning. And then government and regulatory compliance. These can also be big sources of problems that are out there for you, whether it's payroll taxes, sales tax, income taxes, things of that nature that are owed by your business that you have an obligation to collect and then ultimately remit. Those types of taxes like sales tax, payroll taxes, and those types of things also can be sources of personal liability for small business owners and can impact your own personal assets if you're collecting money on behalf of the government, right? You're really serving as a role on behalf of the government and collecting that, and you have an obligation to remit. And when you don't, you could potentially be liable for problems. Same thing with wage and hour claims. I've mentioned that before. It might be licensure issues that are out there for you to be concerned about as well along the way. We'll talk a little bit more about those as we move on. Your business owners can be a potential source of risk for you too. Sometimes they steal money or steal assets from your business. I've certainly been involved in those types of co-owner disputes in the past. They might be stealing corporate opportunities from you, right? Um, a, uh, a potential sale or a business deal that your business would normally be looking for. Maybe your business partner has taken that opportunity and transaction on it themselves or make that sold themselves, and they're side dealing on you in order to make that money and put it in their own pocket. Been involved in those types of situations in the past as well. Perhaps your business partner has engaged in unauthorized borrowing on the company account. They've opened credit cards in the company's name and run them up, maybe spent them on business expenses that were legit. Maybe they just spent it on their own personal items, and now the company is saddled with that debt. That's really something that you can avoid with appropriate processes in place and approvals in place and just good communication. Or maybe your business partner has engaged in inappropriate behavior towards employees that could lead to a claim of sexual harassment, gender discrimination, age discrimination, maybe some type of a defamation claim if they've made untrue statements about your employees to third parties or in the public. These can all give rise to this type of a thing. I have this going on right now. In fact, a person got let go by a business, and one of the business partners distributed an email to the employees and third parties about the circumstances leading to this person's termination, and it was not kind. It had some defamatory false statements in it, and the other business owners didn't know anything about that person's decision to send this email around to everybody else. That's definitely not something that anybody should do, is spreading information about the circumstances or reasons for an employee's departure. That's usually a very bad decision to make and can ultimately lead to claims. Again, that's just bad risk mitigation techniques and not having a policy in place to say, we don't comment on the reasons for an employee's separation from employment to anybody, let alone internally or externally. We just don't do that. And so let's just make sure that we have a policy in place to avoid that kind of a thing. That's like an unnecessary fumble of the ball along the way. Um, in this day and age, we also have to be thinking about risks that arise out of our tech or intellectual property. These are going to be potential problems out there like data breaches, cyber crime. This stuff is all on the rise. You can't really open up Google News or whatever your news source is and avoid seeing some type of a data breach or hacking or ransomware type of an attack. These types of things don't just affect huge businesses, they also affect very small businesses as well. There are predators out there that are looking for your data and to get money out of you and to hack your system. So this is definitely an area of risk that you have to be looking at for your business. Privacy concerns and data security requirements for remote employees remain a significant source of legal exposure for small businesses. So this is definitely an area that if your business relies on this type of a thing, and virtually every business has some exposure um, to the web, to tech breaches, things of that nature, this is really something that you have to have on your radar to be looking at. And then I think finally, owner health, right? We have to be thinking about our own health. Our health can be one of the biggest risks to our the health of our own business, right? What if I had a sudden health event? That's going to be a problem. Everybody's going to be wondering, is Mike okay? Maybe they'll be celebrating. I don't know. That could be. But anyway, if you're a small business owner and you've got a sudden health event, believe me, your employers are going to be wondering, is this person going to be okay? How is it ultimately going to affect me? Right? Your employees may get a little bit nervous and maybe start looking for another job. That's the last thing that you want to have happen. Perhaps you've got a prolonged absence from the business. That can be a problem for the ongoing operations of the business as well. Is there somebody in place, either in a sudden health event or a prolonged absence, who can step into your shoes, make sure things are under control, and continue operating the business without missing a beat? That is a big risk for your business. And of course, if you pass away, obviously, a big problem. You really need to have some contingency plans in place for a sudden healthy event. It could happen to anyone. You can get in your car to go to work one day and not get there, not come home, right? Because anything can happen, whether it's something caused by a third party, maybe an auto accident or whatever, or you just got a sudden health event like a stroke or something like that. And now all of a sudden you're out of commission and things are topsy-turvy with your business. So let's do a little bit of a case study on a risk audit, and let's just talk about it from the standpoint of a business owner's, uh, a contractor's business. Okay. And like I said, business risk audits really can vary from the types of business that you have. Some parts of them are going to be the same, but some parts of them are going to be different. So contractors have regulatory requirements in Pennsylvania. If you do home improvement, you have to comply with the Home Improvement Consumer Protection Act. I will tell you that lots of small business owners, even though this act has been in effect for several years, don't know anything about it. Maybe they know that they need to get a register, they have to register and get a license number, but they don't know that it also dictates what can and cannot be in their contracts to the consumers. This is a huge loophole for them that we have used on behalf of consumers who have disputes with contractors to get a leg up on them from a leverage standpoint or in claims. We can literally terminate that contract in the event if the contractor doesn't have a contract that complies with the Home Improvement Consumer Protection Act. So you don't want to have that loophole available to customers that you're having a dispute with who have a wily lawyer that understand consumer rights laws in Pennsylvania. Contractors also have to comply with lots of building codes. And, you would think that that would be something they would be totally aware of, but that's not necessarily the case. Vendors and suppliers. Again, contractors have lots of vendors and suppliers, that supply them roofing materials, building materials, whatever it is. Okay. And they oftentimes buy it on credit. Contractors are always using the money for one job to pay for the next job, kind of a thing. And so it's not unusual for them to buy things on credit with suppliers. And they oftentimes will sign a personal guarantee, and that can be a source of risk for you. And we can, that's something that you can limit if you're aware of it and the techniques on how to do that. Customers, again, are a great source of potential risk for contractors. Again, they have to comply with consumer protection laws, and they may also expose themselves to claims for jobs that have gone wrong, right? Or maybe they've caused a calamity to the homeowner's home that caused a fire, caused damage, something like that, and can get sued for damages. There are ways that we can limit the contractor's exposure to that types of thing. Contractors often use subs, right? And it's important that they not misclassify them, and the government will consider them to be employees when the contractor is really only paying them as an independent contractor and not taking out payroll taxes, not paying for workers' comp coverage, those types of things. That can be a big source of risk for a contractor. And there might be some other contractual requirements that they should have in place with their subs in order to protect themselves in the event of a claim that arises out of whatever that sub is doing. Documentation practices are something that a lot of contractors are not very good at because, again, they want to be on the job site. That's what they're good at doing. And paperwork stuff is something they're not good at doing. That's not unusual at all, and don't mean that in a disparaging way. That's just the fact of life. But small business owners are particularly bad at their documentation, getting signed contracts, not losing the signed contracts, documenting change orders to the scope of work or the pricing of the work. Again, something contractors are really bad at. Documenting work on the project, taking pictures along the way or videos along the way before you close those walls so that you can prove up what work that you did and have a better defense to claims. Billing errors are out there as well. Documentation is really where contractors fall apart whenever they call a lawyer and they want to defend a claim, um, because they just don't have their documents in place. Sometimes their documentation is tied up in text messages and things of that nature. Sometimes a text message of an employee that no longer works there, and that person takes all the evidence with them, and they have no way of getting that back. So that can be a really big problem for contractors. But that's just a little bit of an introduction to what a legal risk audit might look like for a contracting business. It's going to be a little bit different for other types of business. But these are the types of things that we would be looking at. We would be talking to the contractor about, and we would be helping them understand, okay, here are the things that you need to do, and we can help you redo your contract so it complies with the law. We can give you some techniques on dealing with personal guarantees to limit your personal responsibility for those. We can help them address all of these types of issues. So let's shift gears and let's talk about, we've been talking about the risks. What are they? And it's good to be able to identify those so that you know what to look for. Now let's talk about very common risk mitigation strategies that we suggest along the way. First, using an LLC or some other type of a business entity. If you have a business, you really want to operate from one because it does help shield your personal assets from claims that arise out of operating your business. You'll want to maintain corporate formalities, right? And not pay your personal bills out of the business account and vice versa. It's important to keep the business just the business and not mix your personal stuff in with your business along the way. You want to pick the correct business structure to limit your risks. And you might want to use business structures to further mitigate risks. So a judgment can be a lien on all the assets owned by the business. And this especially is important when a judgment exceeds the value of the involved property. So you may want to use more than one business entity to keep liabilities in boxes separated from other assets that you own. For example, a real estate person that buys and rents out properties, you don't want to have all of your properties owned by the same LLC, because a judgment against a judgment arising out of one property is going to be a lien on all of the properties that are owned by the same business entity, right? Same thing if you owned them individually. So you might want to own some in one and some in another, because if there's a judgment arising out of a property owned by one business entity, it is not going to be an automatic lien and on the assets in this different business entity. So that's just an example of structuring your business in order to mitigate risks that arise out of your various business lines. You may want to operate different business lines out of different business entities, right? I had a restaurant owner that had a fixed place of business, but then he also wanted to own a food truck. And I said, let's operate the food truck out of one business entity and let's operate the restaurant out of a different business entity. Again, keeping those claims arising out of those different business lines away from one another so that one would not affect the other. Purchasing insurance. I think that goes without saying, you should absolutely be looking to buy insurance, but don't skip the step of assessing your risks, right? And having a fulsome conversation with a good insurance broker or an insurance advisor. Independent insurance advisors, I think, are always the best ones. Independent insurance agencies are always the best ones. You'll want to find out what types of insurance is available? This is a question that you should ask. What type of coverage is required, like workers' compensation insurance is going to be required for your business. If you're a contractor in Pennsylvania, you have to get liability coverage. It's required for your licensure. And so depending on the type of business that you have, there may be insurances that the law requires you to have. If you're operating vehicles, you have to have motor vehicle insurance. It's required under the law. But there may be coverages that are optional for you, like coverage that protects you in the event you've got a discrimination claim or a harassment claim that arises out of your business. That's not something you're required to have, but it's optional coverage that you might want to have, depending on the type of business that you're operating and whether you have lots of employees. So find an agent, have a fulsome conversation. That person should really ask you a lot of questions about your business so that they can appropriately assess your risks and connect you with insurance coverage that will help you mitigate those risks and cover those risks. If they are not asking you a lot of questions about their business, I would suggest that you find a different agent because that person's not doing you a service by not asking you those questions. And shop around, right? Shop around. I think that that's the best idea. Every business has contracts, right? Pretty much every business has contracts, whether with their customers or with their vendors. But contracts and business sort of kind of go together like peanut butter and jelly. It's really kind of hard to avoid if you're going to be in business. And so I would suggest that you review and update your contracts regularly. Okay. Your customer contracts, you definitely want to be looking at those, right? To make sure that they have the types of things that you need to have in them. There's some basics that should be in your contracts. You want to eliminate ambiguities. I see a lot of that, right? Clear writing eliminates ambiguities. You don't want to be vague. You want to limit your own liability, your business's liability in the event a claim arises out of that customer relationship. You may want to outline how disputes are going to be resolved. You can keep yourself out of court if you want, right? By picking alternate dispute resolution provisions, and they will be valid in most contract situations. So you may want to do that, right? Keep yourself out of court, usually faster and less expensive to resolve for you. All other contracts, especially with your non-customers, have a process for contract review whenever you're presented something to be signed. You want to have a checklist of important contract provisions that you want to be looking for to make sure that they're in there and that they're very clear, like payment terms, indemnification, which means when you are going to be responsible for the damages and costs and expenses arising out of claims, that can be shifted to you in a contract, right? You could be taking on that responsibility even in situations when it's not your fault. Okay, that's something that you want to be looking for and better and understand and be thinking about it. Dispute resolution. Again, you want to know if a dispute arises, how is that going to be resolved? What's the process? What do you need to do in order to get that going? What's default look like from your perspective? When you don't comply with the expectations under the contract, and you know, is the default of the other party detailed in there? Same thing with termination. Under what circumstances can the contract be terminated and when? And you always want to be looking for personal guarantees as a small business owner. You'll want to have some type of a negotiation strategy in place for the types of provisions that are problems, right? Where those increase risks like indemnification. And you may want to have a strategy in place to say, okay, I suggest that this be changed. I mean, you can negotiate contracts, not in all circumstances, but you can certainly try and see what happens. But you can say, I suggest this different type of language, or you might mark it up, initial it, send it back. Sometimes they won't comment at all. They'll just sign it and then it's all done. But you should have some kind of a standard process in place. And then you always have to know when to say no. So I'm going to put a plug in right now for something on my website at fiffiklaw.com. If you go to business page, I have a series of business health checks, and there is a business health check concerning contracts, right? So you can do that health check, and it's going to give you an idea of what should be in your contracts, and it will help you identify what's missing from your contracts so that it's sort of like a mini risk audit but just for your business contract. You can go to my website on the business section of my website, and you'll find links to the business health checks there. And I encourage you to go through that. All right, let's talk about employment matters. And I got a lot of stuff here, and I'm getting close to the Q&A. You want to adopt and follow an HR policy, right? It's really important if you have employees. It sets expectations and level sets rules that are applicable to everybody. And if you have problem, if you it's a real problem for your business if you um, have different rules for different employees, right? It leads to claims, and that's natural, right? You might do something for an employee that you like, that's productive, that you wouldn't do for an employee that you don't like or is not productive or a pain in the rear end. You really want to try to avoid that. Consistency is going to be your best defense to some type of a claim. It's a great tool to ensure that employees are being treated fairly and consistently. It's a great defense for you against discrimination type claims whenever you can say, this is the process and I followed it. And that just is going to help you more than hurt you along the way. You want to make sure that you classify your employees correctly. When I say classification, I mean employee versus independent contractor, right? Very important because you might have to be collecting payroll taxes, and that independent contractor who is really an employee under the law is going to be entitled to certain rights under the law. And then just for your employees, you're going to want to make sure that you classify them as exempt or non-exempt for purposes of minimum wage, overtime when you have to pay them, keeping track of their hours that they work, those types of things. Lots and lots of businesses make mistakes in both of those areas that can lead to potential problems for them. And it's very, very common. So if you're not sure that you're classifying your workers correctly, you are definitely not alone. There are a lot of businesses that don't understand that or make mistakes in that regard. You want to review and comply with wage and hour rules. Again, because you could be personally liable for unpaid wage claims. So, if you have a payroll service, they're going to help you with this kind of a thing. They know what the rules are, and they're going to help you comply along the way. You want to make sure that you've got your documentation in place, that you are tracking the hours that your employees are working. It's your obligation to have that paperwork in place. If an employee sues to say, I worked 60 hours a week and I didn't get paid my overtime wages, it's your responsibility to have the documentation to prove up that that's not what they did. If you just allow them to self-report what their wages are, or you're just paying based upon a guess, then you're going to have a problem in the event of a claim either from the government or from the employee if they file against you. You want to maintain accurate records. Again, it's your obligation to have accurate employment records. And then mobile phones, right? I caution you to allow your employees to use their own mobile phones to do your business, especially having contact with customers. That can lead to a whole host of issues for your business, including that is all documentation of what's going on in a customer relationship that could potentially be gone, that you have no control over if that employee leaves. And that could be a crucial thing for you in the event that you have a bill that you've got to collect against that customer, and you've got to prove all of that stuff up that happened on the job, or disprove the things that the customer is claiming didn't happen on the job, or disagreements or agreements that were reached with your employee. Well, that person said that you were going to landscape the hillside in back of the house, and you're saying, I have no idea about that. And the employee is now gone, and that communication happened on their mobile phone. Now you're going to have a problem in that regard. So you want to have some type of a policy and some kind of an idea of when your employees can do your business using their own mobile phones and getting control of that data along the way. I've got a post on my website at Fiffik Law. If you just search for employees and mobile phones, help you understand that a little bit better. But that's a big area should be a big area of concern for small business owners. And then regulatory compliance, right? This is you got to have be aware of the commonly applicable regulations for your business, right? Um, Taxes, right? Tax status elections for your business, whether you want to be a C Corp, an S, a business with an S election, you can do that from a corporation or an LLC. But you need to understand what the deadlines are for filing taxes, having sales tax, payroll taxes, and when those need to be remitted. These are all regulations that you have to have an understanding about. Um, Payroll, again, we've touched upon this several times. There are lots of webinars available from the Department of Labor, either the federal or the state, that will talk to you about your obligations as an employer, and you should comply with those. And again, use a payroll service if you can, like Paychecks, or there are a variety of them out there that will help you with that. Benefits, workers' comp, health insurance, paid time off, family medical leave, COBRA. These are all benefits that have an impact on business owners that they may need to comply with. So you have to understand what you're supposed to be providing and what not. And then business registrations. We have the back and forth on the Corporate Transparency Act and the obligation for small businesses to file the beneficial owner information, um, the owners of their small businesses, with the federal government. That's sort of unsettled at this point as to whether that's going to happen or not, but it's still out there, and you have to be aware of it because there are penalties for not complying if compliance is required, and it's being litigated as we speak. If you're a Pennsylvania business doing business in Pennsylvania, or you've registered a business in Pennsylvania, 2025, there's a new annual reporting requirement for your business. It's a little bit less onerous than the federal one, and there's a filing fee. It's $7, and really it's a revenue generator. There's a penalty for not doing it. Your business can literally be dissolved statutorily if you fail to comply. So it's a pretty draconian penalty. But again, you don't want your business to basically get dissolved by as a result of your failure to do this annual filing. So you're going to want to do that. There may be industry specific regulations that you have to comply with for contractors, childcare, home care, professional licensures like me, right? Or a beautician or a barber or an accountant, or any number of businesses have certain licensure requirements that they have to comply with. They could get inspected, get cited if they don't comply. Restaurants have a ton of regulations and licenses that they have to comply with. So it really behooves you, especially if you're a new business owner, to understand the regulatory or environment that you're in, because these can end up being a big problem for you along the way. I will say that if you're in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania has what's called a one-stop shop, where it will help you determine what the regulatory environment is that you have to comply with, depending on the type of business that you're in. If you could literally Google PA one-stop shop, and it's going to take you to the website. And my guess is other states have that too if you're dialing in from a different state. That's a good place to get pointed for a new business owner. And even if you're a veteran business owner, you never know what has come up, right? The beneficial owner information filing requirement is something that's new, that a lot of veteran business owners don't know anything about. So new stuff comes up all the time. It behooves you to check every once in a while to see if something else has come up. Same thing with the PA annual filing requirement. Again, that's new. Veteran business owners maybe don't know about it. So you can even often sign up for email updates that you'll get from the state or your regulator, and it may clue you into things that you need to be paying attention to along the way. We also provide that if you subscribe to our weekly business lowdown, which is a one topic email that we send to business owners and anybody that's on our list to keep you abreast of developments that we think that you should be aware of. Let's talk a little bit about cybersecurity real quick, right? It's a big thing. You're going to want to engage in employee training. Why is that? Well, they have to understand why cybersecurity is important for your business and their jobs. They need to be able to identify security risks or threats to your business, and then what to do about them if they do see them, and in particular, what not to do if they see them. So you don't want somebody clicking on that suspicious link that was sent, and all of a sudden you've got a virus in your system, and it ultimately gets locked down. That would be terrible for your business. So it behooves you to engage in employee training on a regular basis so that you avoid that risk to your business. You might want to consider having a security audit done for your system. They call that a penetration test. Somebody pretends to be a hacker and they try to get into your system and they identify vulnerabilities in your system and make recommendations on how you can close those up. You want to regularly update or patch the software that you use to run your business. And if you're using any of the common productivity tools like Google or Microsoft Office or any of those, they have patches all the time. Windows, you should be downloading those. All of those are softwares that your business uses that it's going to need to be updated and patched on a regular basis. You may want to consider data encryption so that even if you are breached, your data is encrypted and might not be readable or usable to the bad guys. And then you should consider getting into a system of data backup so that if you do get hacked or you've got a ransomware attack, you may have another set of your data that's recently backed up that you've got that you might be able to get up and running again along the way. So these are all very important things. So again, coming back to the business health checks, these are all on my website at fiffiklaw.com. If you go to the business page, you'll see the health checks. I've got an introductory, sort of a general one for your business. It's a very, very base level business audit. And you can go through that. I've got one for contracts. I have another for folks that have a real estate type of a business. And then I also have one that is general to employees. So there's a couple of beginning audits that you can go through yourself that will help you identify some potential issues that you might want to address this year along the way. And then with that, I'd be happy to take some Q&A.